Is going to join us in a couple of minutes. For the rest is here. We have our colleague in online. First of all, I'd like to thank the NGO, the Atlantic Course, for the initiation of this discussion. And I believe that all of us, and we as a country as a whole, and the reps of different communities, we really need to maximize our efforts in our striving to find those strategic approaches towards the resolution of the security, economic, technological threats, which actually result from the completion, or let's say nearly completion of the Nord Stream 2 construction. And our topic is either in a life after death, because the last lap of the construction of this Nord Stream 2, well, is almost 95% actually finished, and the Russian Federation, they insisted that this is purely economic project. Unfortunately, the same public opinion is adhered to by Germany, and we understand the, let's say, the intentions of Germany to resolve their own problems until they plan to shut down all the coal-fired power plants, and their wish to, let's say, to be not to be dependent on the, let's say, on the fossil gas from the United States of America, which was advertised by the former president of the United States. But actually, honestly speaking, from the point of view of Ukraine, this project is far from being economic, not only of economic significance. We understand that for the Russian Federation, this is going to be used as a geopolitical weapon, like other energy-related projects. I would like to draw attention that Putin, or let's say in the recent days during the St. Petersburg Economic Forum, he confirmed that they intend to use this gas pipeline as an instrument of geopolitical and security pressure. And he said that there is an opportunity to, let's say, to pump the gas into the transmission line in Ukraine, but not to support the army, and not to, let's say, to aim it to resolve the Donbass problems using the armed forces, but, to raise the economic level there. So Putin already started its kind of economic blackmail, and when he said that they are going to fill our transit pipeline, and we instead have to say no to our armed forces, so let's say reject our armed forces. Maybe this is not the straight historical analogy, but the straight was considered the business. But Egypt lost their independence as a result of the Second World War, and actually until the 1956 they had the foreign troops on their territory. Here in Ukraine, it's unfortunately we have to realize that the United States actually waived the sanctions against the leading and important players, European companies, which participated in the construction of this gas pipeline, and the sanctions against the companies, Russian companies, will not resolve will not remove the problem. We understand that the waiving of the sanctions, this is, first of all, we have to think about the Euro-Atlantic unity. This is, let's say, the attempt to reconcile. We're talking about the relations between the United States and Germany, but we know that in the report presented to Mr. Biden, this report has said or read that actually only purely sanctions against the end beneficiaries and economic consumers of the gas can actually stop this construction. But the United States are not prepared to take this step. We also heard from Mr. Merkel and Mr. Nesha that if the Russian Federation does not take into consideration the interests of Ukraine, then, in fact, the Nord Stream 2, then those agreements will stop to operate or will not be valid. At the same time, Mr. Mas, from Mr. of Germany, he said that maybe the negotiations regarding the Nord Stream 2 can be finished by the end of the summer. Mr. Blinken from the United States said that they still are involved in the negotiations involving Ukraine between involving Ukraine and the United States. We know that two visits are planned to the United States and Germany for Mr. President Zelensky. We understand on July 15th, Ms. Merkel and Mr. Biden are going to meet in Washington, D.C., and this topic is going to be one of those which will be on the agenda of that meeting. So today we are going to talk what we can do today, or whether we can do something about that. I mean, in order to minimize the impact of the completion of the construction of this pipeline on the security issues of Ukraine, how we can actually, let's say, make sure that our interests are taken into consideration. And so I'm going to start now our discussion. We have a very good panel today, including representatives of different spheres and circles who actually have been involved in these issues related to the construction of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and who can actually table their proposals or voice their proposals, how Ukraine should act in order to protect its interests. Taking part in our discussion is my colleague MP from the Servant of the People faction, Mr. Yegor Chernev. He is the regular deputy to the Parliamentary Assembly of NATO. We have the Matthew Breiser, former U.S. ambassador, and he's the senior fellow of the Atlantic Council Center for Energy, Global Energy. We also have Andrei Kobolev, the former head of the board of Naftogaz Ukraine. We have also Mr. Pavlo Klimkin, former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Andrei Olivchali, chairman of the board of the Ukrainian USMC, and Vitaly Portnikov, publicist, TV host, and writer. I would like to start our discussion from the following issue: whether we are going to have really a kind of full-scale aggression of the Russian Federation against Ukraine after Ukraine, let's say, doesn't have any transit of the natural gas because of the completion and construction of Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Last week, Ms. Kira Guzen, an ambassador of Germany to Ukraine, she mentioned the possibility of the full-scale, they talks about possibility of full-scale aggression on the part of the Russian Federation against Ukraine. It's kind of political speculation, in her opinion. We do not know whether it's going to happen or not. So I would like to put the first question to Vitaly. What's your opinion? Do you believe that this is a real threat, that the Russian Federation will consider Ukraine as absolutely nude and naked after they actually direct their natural gas to the Nord Stream 2 pipeline? And so, well, thank you. Actually, I hope that I was going to finish our discussion after the professional diplomats and the power engineers. But to me, several things are absolutely obvious. In my opinion, maybe they're not seem to be obvious to many of our Western colleagues. Number one, the project of the bypass gas pipelines going through the territory, seabed, was conceived by the President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, exactly as a project to destroy, to ruin completely the transit gas supply system in Ukraine. And when they start to implement this project, far before, or long before the occupation of Donbass and the annexation of Crimea, and the goal was very simple. They didn't want, wanted to Ukraine to be dependent on such important issue as gas supply to other countries. And second point, irrespective of what guarantees are given to us by our Western partners, in case, for example, that they're going to complete construction of Nord Stream 2, and we'll still have a certain part of that transit, and we're going to be given certain compensation. Those guarantees are not valid because those guarantees depend on the preparedness of the Russian Federation to fulfill those guarantees. So this will be another Budapest memorandum. So, for example, a couple of days after those guarantees are going to be signed, for example, they will announce that there is some failure of the system of transmission of the gas, not because the guarantee doesn't, the Russian Federation will not violate those guarantees, but they would say that we do not have a possibility, opportunity to transmit this gas. And then again, because for the time of overhaul or the repair, they have to supply a certain amount of the fuel to the European market, and this can be done until the Ukrainian pipeline is repaired. You know, they wrote about that again during the conflict between Russian Federation and Turkmenistan. Actually, Turkmenistan actually agreed to those Russian conditions. Number three, we have to understand there will be no compensation in case this Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline is finished by construction. This will not provide our economic conditions which we used to have before that. Because if the transit is stopped, that means that we are going to spend a lot of money to serve the to maintain the pipeline, and second of all, we will have to pay for the gas supply. Today we do not pay for that, and if we do not have use our pipeline for transmission or transit, we'll have to pay for the gas. So everything in our country will skyrocket price-wise. 2 or 3 times, I don't know, experts can tell you. And actually, we will have to live the way the other countries live, which have to pay for the gas. But we can compare our expenses, and to think whether we will be able to survive, because a number of our companies, enterprises will not survive. They will not withstand this kind of economic burden, you know. And we are going to have dramatic changes in the Ukrainian economy, and actually they are inevitable under those circumstances, even if we think that some of the gas will still go through our transit pipeline, because this is not enough for our needs. And another point is the point of pressure. While we do not understand, we cannot withstand those conditions, that our economy is going to, to fail, the Russian Federation will start to blackmail us. Actually, they do it now. You remember the words of Putin during the St. Petersburg Economic Forum. We are prepared for the contract. We are prepared for different conditions, but please, you have to fulfill our conditions. Do not actually arm your armed forces. Do not do that and that and that. So, and if somebody will have to tell us that we have to come to the agreement, with Russian Federation, because otherwise we won't be able to preserve our country. What can save us? That maybe Putin will, for another time, his nervous system will fail, and like it was the case near Mariupol in 2014. If Ukraine behaves properly, maybe there will be the conditions. In Russia, their critical mass will grow. I mean, the opposition, maybe there will be some change in the situation during parliamentary elections or presidential elections. So irrespective how much gas is going to go through our pipeline. The issue is how to save Ukraine from the pressure of the political pressure of the Russian Federation. Our Western colleagues just do not want to notice that. Yeah, thank you, thank you. Actually, it looks like the world is prepared to experiment and just wait. What would be the next actions on the part of the Russian Federation, whether and using those instruments or tools which the whole world is considering today during, for example, talks between the United States and Germany, whether they will be able to at least to restrain diminish the appetites of the Russian Federation. Oh, Igor, I know that you have to leave soon in order to participate in the meeting with your committee. So my question to you is, what our country has to do in order to protect itself against all those risks when this pipeline, Nord Stream 2, is going to be finished by construction, when this pipeline is going to be commissioned sooner or later. And maybe you're talking about your political force or the executive branch, if you communicate with the branches, the executive authorities. Do you or do they have any plan how to protect Ukraine? And thank you for the invitation sent to me and for giving me the floor. Indeed, today the Nord Stream 2 is almost 98% constructed, completed already by construction. In this stage, we can see that some sanctions have been lifted. They waived those sanctions, but we do not have some clear signal from the U.S. Congress. Which 5 days ago, they actually changed the conditions. If we're talking about Magnitsky Law, related to the companies involved in the construction of the Nord Stream 2. We know about this report. Sberbank SIB was having back SIB, which they said that the final beneficiaries are Rotenbergs, the oligarchs from the Russian Federation, some corrupt schematic schemes about the companies and the people who actually are involved in those corruptive actions or schemes. And anyway, the sanctions will be against some of the companies, irrespective when or whether or if this gas pipeline is going to be finished or completed by construction. Also, Mr. Blinken was addressing the Committee on the Foreign Affairs, and he mentioned the sanctions against the construction of Nord Stream 2, but the deterioration of the relations with Germany would be the worst scenario for the United States. And it's very difficult to stop construction since the construction already had been completed by 90%, more than 90%. Well, I understand the attempts of administration of President Biden to improve the relations with Germany, which were worsened or deteriorated during the presidency of Mr. Trump. But again, this is going to impact not only Ukraine but Europe as a whole, and the Eastern European countries do understand that, and we have to pull our efforts and to act, accordingly. What Ukraine has to do. Number one, at all levels, on the parliamentary level, executive and authority level, on the presidential level, and in speaking in principles, this is being done in Parliament during the last Parliamentary Assembly of NATO, where Ukraine also participated. The first report, actually, was the opening report of this Parliamentary Assembly, was the report of the Congressman of the United States regarding the Russian Federation, the threat to the North Atlantic security. And first item was dealing with the threat to the energy and economic independence of the West after the completion of construction of Nord Stream 2. Fortunately, we have the two-chamber and two-party support both from Democrats and let's say, and the Republicans. Well, unfortunately, we do not have this understanding on the part of Germany. And here, I believe that the executive authority at the level of the diplomats has tried to persuade the authorities, not only in the Eastern European countries, but also in the Western Europe, that we are talking not about economy per se, but about the security, and not only of Ukraine, but of the whole Europe, because we understand and we saw how the Russian Federation can blackmail anyone, the countries of Europe, just by closing or opening the gate valve or the shut-off valve. And speaking about how they use the pipeline in the Black Sea, for example, the Turkish Stream, allegedly, behind the shield of, as if construction of now this pipeline, they are trying to hide their intelligence, and for center, there are all the grounds to say the same will happen in case of the construction or Nord Stream 2. Maybe we can take some asymmetric actions. And what is being done today, in particular, our executive power authorities, they raise this question within in the negotiations with Germany. I'm saying that the failure to fulfill the commitments of the Russian Federation, because they do not allow European or other gas suppliers to the market, and this further complicates the work of the Gazprom in Europe. So they say if we cannot directly impact the completion of construction Nord Stream 2, maybe we can complicate their life in different fronts and create the maximum uncomfortable the decision on the part of Germany regarding the completion of this construction of this gas pipeline. Thank you. We have only one question. To which extent our security arguments are going to be heard or heeded too? And I'm positive that here we have our colleagues and we have online connection with Mr. Kobolev, and we are talking about the arguments regarding the threats to the security, including the European security. And definitely we actually knocked on many doors, and unfortunately, not always it brought some fruit. Well, actually, I would like to get back to what was mentioned by Vitaly a few minutes ago regarding the economic challenges for Ukraine in this specific context. Also, I would like to address Mr. Andrei Kobolev, who is in online connection with us. For many years, you handled the Naftogaz of Ukraine, and you were working on the strategy of the counteractions regarding the construction of Nord Stream 2. To some extent, you slowed down this process or progress of this construction. But anyway, as we already mentioned here today, we face a situation when we have to take care of some compensation, and what kind of compensation we are talking about is one thing. Another question is regarding the possibility to diversify the transit of the gas going through our pipeline, as the Mr. Vitrenko mentioned that not only Gazprom can actually pump the natural gas through our territory, but maybe other countries or other companies which transport the natural gas from the central of Europe to other European countries, or buy the gas at the border between Ukraine and the Russian Federation, and then again you have to transport that to Europe. Maybe in doing that we can fill our gas transport system. So I have two questions to you: whether this scenario is realistic, and whether they work entertain this scenario today, and whether to which extent those negotiations are successful. And number two, what economic levers let's say, what economic losses, according to your calculations, Ukraine is going to have as a result of the completion of construction of Nord Stream 2, and what mechanism could be acceptable for Ukraine under those circumstances? Let's start with your first question. First of all, thank you for an invitation extended to me to participate in this discussion. Yeah, I believe that the option with opening the Middle Asian, Central Asian transit, or the talks about the independent the supply of the gas by Russian Federation is very dangerous, or can be a kind of a trap for Ukraine. I'll explain why. Everybody understands how the Russian policy works, how the gas market works. We know only too well that it's completely controlled by the Kremlin. Even if we imagine that today Ukraine manages to come to some agreement to exert some pressure on the Russian Federation to open the transit of gas from Turkmenistan through the Russian Federation, very easily, sometime later, Mr. Putin can just shut off the line, or let's say close the gate valve. So you consider this option of the independent gas supply from Russia. Well, this is actually something which you can only imagine, because there are no independent supplies, only Putin actually controls everything. So we are talking, and there is a big opportunity or probability that within 1 or 2 months everything is going to be shut off, and all the transaction will disappear. Like Gazprom is being controlled by the Kremlin, so the transit of the Russian or Turkmenistan gas through territory of Russia is also controlled by the Kremlin. So to ask for the compensation from somebody who wants to rip you off, to take everything, and to stop the existence of Ukraine as an independent country, in my opinion, this is a very dangerous and very, let's say, futile and harmful tactics. And the fact that the administration of the White House actually waived the sanctions against some of the companies from Mr. Savarin, it doesn't mean that we cannot take it, they cannot bring it back. When we were talking about that, the Congress actually support us, so we have to do everything so that this Nord Stream 2 is not completed, not launched or commissioned. Speaking about the compensations, we have to consider all the possible options and work on them, but if we are going to talk about that, we have to talk only about compensations coming from the West. And we are talking about the three-partite gas package while we were negotiating back in 2014. We needed the guarantees from Europe, not from the Russian Federation. If any guarantees of some additional economic revenues, security aspects, or the military aspects will be given by the European or the Western parties, then those guarantees have to be promoted, and we have to work to obtain those. On the other hand, if we're talking about the guarantees about Turkmenistan gas, today those guarantees are here, tomorrow they disappear, So this is my opinion. Thank you. And I hope you understand me. Thank you. Thank you, Andrei. But we were talking about some kind of guarantees. They have to remind us about the, let's say, guarantees or the warranties of the Budapest. Well, let's say, excuse me. Maybe we should come back to somebody just reminded us about the Budapest Agreement. And in those days, we allegedly, or let's say, as if got some guarantees about our independence. Well, I agree with you. Well, we need to have the guarantees which can work. If you take the analogy compare with the situation back in 2014, but this three-partite package of agreements was signed only when European Union opened us big rivers to Slovakia. From Slovakia. We have to act similarly this time too. We have to obtain something tangible, something material before they launch the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Speaking about the security aspects, I would not like to comment because I'm not a military expert. But this again has to be something realistic and tangible. And if we act through the some specific things which Ukraine can obtain or can get before the Nord Stream 2 is launched or commissioned, this will be the best guarantee when you already have something and nobody can actually ask you to give it back, you know. Thank you very much. Well, actually, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Matthew Braza and those who need translation. May we have the simultaneous translation here? So please use the headsets. Mr. Matthew, what do you think? Whether Ukraine can ensure its energy security, provided it loses this transit of natural gas from the Russian Federation, and what arguments of Ukraine can be heard both in the United States presidential administration or our colleagues in European countries? What arguments could be considered as the mutual interest for our countries in order to ensure both our energy security and the energy security of the European Union? You have the floor, sir.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy with you always. And Jill, we're in the audience. Fantastic husband. And I'm really honored to be on this panel with these really distinguished speakers. And Mr. Kobylyov is one of my great heroes in recent years because he or you, as I speak to, you really implemented some groundbreaking reforms that for years people, my colleagues at the White House and then at the State Department thought were never going to happen in Ukraine, but absent which the natural gas sector was a geostrategic black hole for Ukraine, and in many ways a self-inflicted wound that President Putin tried to exploit in 2014. And I'm going to come back to Mr. Kobylyov and those reforms later. How, Ukraine, I mean, I think Ukraine in the recent past has done a good job in securing its own energy supplies, natural gas supplies, without relying on Russia. It was only a couple of years ago, right, where Ukraine didn't need any Russian gas supplies. So I see the issues differently, and I'd like to focus on the second part of your questions, Ivana, about what can Ukraine do to advocate on its own behalf. Ultimately, for Germany, what Putin says is true, that Nord Stream 2 is just a commercial project. And of course, we all know that's false. And it's entirely a geopolitical and geoeconomic project for Putin. And, I go back to 2002 when I first started trying to ring the alarm bells while I was at the White House on the National Security Council staff about Nord Stream 1 in the Bush administration. And I remember having a very powerful discussion with Radek Sikorski at the time when he was simply a think tanker, as I am now, at the American Enterprise Institute in Washington. And when I started to explain to him what the plan for Nord Stream 1 was, he was so alarmed, sincerely, and he organized a meeting with me and then my colleagues with the head of Poland's intelligence services at the time. And when all of these discussions were beginning in Washington, nobody really wanted to hear. It seemed like too complex of an argument, and there are these complicated maps, and Ukraine's complex, and it's got all these corruption problems. It was just too much for people to absorb, too much for them to appreciate. And at the time, our ambassador at the time to Sweden, Ambassador Wood, came out publicly against Nord Stream 1, and he got reprimanded by the White House. So we've come a long way in Washington, although I'm in Istanbul right now, waving to you across the Black Sea. Washington's come a long way. So what Ukraine can do is keep on being the darling of geostrategic thinkers now in Washington, who now understand that it's unconscionable, it's unacceptable to allow Nord Stream 2 just to go ahead regardless of even the economic arguments or the gas transit across Ukraine and how important that is for Ukraine, it's unacceptable at this moment where we're all, as a united transatlantic community, trying to impose costs on Putin and Russia for invading Ukraine, for annexing Crimea, and for driving the insurrection in Donbass. It's a horrible political signal to let Putin out of the penalty box on a project as important as this. So Ukraine has to remain then sort of the victim, the good victim, the one who is performing, who's continuing and reinstating those reforms of Mr. Kobylarov led at Gazprom, at Ukrainian Naftogaz. I think that the recent change in corporate governance alarmed a lot of people in Washington, but that issue isn't really center stage. You've heard Secretary Blinken, what he said, as some of the early speakers announced. There is a possibility to snap back the sanctions mandated by Congress on Matthias Wernig and on Nord Stream 2 AG. So I don't think the Biden administration is naive on this. I think Ukraine has really gotten the ear and heart of Biden. You know how important the anti-corruption fight is for him. He took so much political heat from Donald Trump during the election because Trump was pretending that by trying to help clean up Ukraine's energy sector and finance sector, Biden was really trying to do something corrupt himself. So he feels very deeply the need to help Ukraine restore its territorial integrity, maintain its sovereignty, including on natural gas. The problem is natural gas is so complicated for Joe Biden because of the Hunter Biden situation at Burisma. And so the anti-corruption fight, I don't mean to preach like an anti-corruption fighter because I'm not one of those preachers, but from a purely political perspective, you can even get more of Washington's attention by reinvigorating those reforms that were underway at Naftogaz, Ukraine. Then what else Ukraine can do? Yeah, publicize the fact that, going back to what Mr. Kobylarov was saying about gas from Turkmenistan, publicize that by not imposing a penalty on Russia for refusing to allow third-party access of Turkmen gas to the Gazprom network for onward shipment to Ukraine, the EU is violating its own regulatory framework, right? I mean, under EU regulations, third-party access has to be granted. So that's another political argument that Ukraine can make. Besides that it's trying to do all the right things on reforming the energy sector, it has done so much. It's being victimized by the way the European Union is failing to implement this important part of its regulatory framework. And then finally, I think what Ukraine can do is focus very much on what happens if and when or after the pipeline is fully completed. And that is insurance and certification, licenses in the countries after landfall, inside Germany and beyond. Senator Shaheen has said there are more sanctions in the works. You recall after the Biden administration decided not to sanction the CEO of Nord Stream 2 or the company, but she's said more sanctions are in the works. And Secretary Blinken has suggested the same. So I think it would be smart for Ukraine to have a concerted diplomatic and public relations push to make sure that there won't be insult to injury, even if the pipeline's completed, it still won't be able to be used fully or used because the company Nord Stream 2 won't be able to get the licenses and the insurance it needs. Finally, the very, very last point is, how it seems so mercenary the way the Germans have played this. I mean, it's, for their company's own well-being, Merkel has gone along with Nord Stream 2, even though she knows strategically she shouldn't. And even though when the Greens were last in the German government, Merkel softened her support for Nord Stream 2 and started to sound like she was opposed to it. So the approach of the Greens in the new German government after September will provide more political support for Ukraine. But obviously, none of us should be naive. The German companies would have driven Merkel on this. I remember back in 2003 when I had a conversation about Nord Stream 1 with a German parliamentarian. He simply could not comprehend the argument that by building Nord Stream 1, all the Germans were doing was giving Russia a way to send the same Turkmen gas at that time to Germany but via a different route. And he kept saying, yes, but that's good. We get diversification of supply. He couldn't understand, but yes, you don't get diversification of supply. You just get diversification of a transit route. What you want is competition. So you have negotiating leverage over Gazprom, and you can decrease the prices. He sincerely didn't understand that argument. And I think what happened is the Germans kept on coming back to the fact that Ukraine's energy sector was so opaque and so unreformed. So again, last point, you can counter all of that sneaky, tricky German business manipulation and argumentation to the German government by making clear that you're resurrecting all those reforms I talked about at the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Just one question. What if Ukraine goes backwards on the reforms? Would that be, would then the arguments of the country be heard in the US or in Germany or anywhere else?
In that case, it will be much more difficult for Ukraine to make a convincing case, especially in Germany. I mean, in Washington now, the post-Trump mood is really good for Ukraine because of the deep suspicion that Trump had not only a special affinity for Vladimir Putin, but maybe that Putin had some sort of derogatory information about Trump and his business dealings, and so could manipulate Trump. So there's a huge backlash against Putin, and especially in the energy sector in Washington. But, you know, that's not going to last forever. And if it's seen as Ukraine is backsliding on those reforms, I really do worry that a lot of that goodwill will go away. Back in about 2006 or so, when I was at the State Department, I was sort of the lead person really pushing for the Nabucco pipeline or the Trans-Adriatic pipeline and the Southern Corridor in general. And we had a proposal that had been fielded by Germany a few years before. And in fact, in the very last sentence in the 2005 communique of the EU-US summit had that proposal in it. It said, we propose that there be a trilateral agreement among the EU, Russia, and Ukraine to reform Ukraine's natural gas sector and thereby gain EU support, but also EU partial ownership of that gas pipeline network. Because what Russia was trying to do with the 2006 gas cutoff, right, was to gain control of Ukraine's gas pipeline network. So the Germans at that time put into this concept that there would be reforms, and then that would pull the EU in a more substantive role. And we totally supported that in Washington. So by definition, if there's backsliding on reform, then any chance of getting that, I think, even more robust European Union participation is much more remote.
Thank you. Пане Павле, от ви брали участь у
Pavlo, you participate in different tripartite negotiations for different reasons. We try to get some additional guarantees from the EU, which were mentioned by Andrei Kobolev. Actually, we try to build and implement the strategy of at least slowing down the construction of the Nord Stream 2 in those days when you cooperated with different teams from the Naftogaz, from the government, from the presidential administration and the parliament of previous convocation. In your opinion, if you're talking about today, what, proceeding from the situation available today, what we can expect from the negotiations between Ukraine and the United States, Ukraine and Germany, and actually from the meeting Mr. Biden and Ms. Merkel regarding the let's say, provision of some guaranteeing security, economic and technological. Can we expect those from our partners today?
Good afternoon, everyone. today is the day of fight with Nord Stream, and today everyone discusses this issue, and today 6 events are held concerning this issue. So first, if we are speaking about Nord Stream 2, that it is going to be completed, and still, it is not completed now, so a lot of things may happen. And this will be a stage in implementation of Russian and Putin strategy concerning total bypass of all Central European area. And respectively, concerning midterm prospect, this opens the way for the plans of reloading of the space by Russia, because this area was called post-Soviet area. And there are many interrelated events. And there was an attempt of total passportization in the occupied Donbas, and now there is an attempt to provide passports based on self-identification. And I quote Russian draft law: "This is the element of mosaic of common history." And we know from many sources that these plans, they are not just in existence, but the Russian regime continuously implement these plans. And in accordance with the Russian assessments, the new reality of Russian proceeds, they believe that it will take 15 or 20 years to get this proceed, and Russian budget will be successful, and they will successfully complete their budget, and this is a midterm prospect, and this is the corridor of opportunities for Russian regime to reload the reality. The second aspect, when we are speaking about security threats, and I will speak about economy later on. In US, in two parties and inside the American administration, there is overall understanding that these threats are real, and in European Union they do not have don't have proper understanding of this, and we are trying to convince our European partners, and this attempt is not successful. And what is going on in European area concerning the work of all political forces, and Igor said that we have bipartisan support in the United States. I completely agree with this, but do we have not bipartisan, but four-party support in Germany? No, we do not have it. I do not speak about left and right parties, but because of reloading of German reality, the coalition will be different. And this is the mega issue for us. And France is also a part of this project, but not directly. It participates, but not directly. And as of today, the European Union and its key players, including Germany, they are ready to discuss economic risks, and this will be done during the visit of Vladimir Zelensky to the United States, and the Germans discussed this, and they have strategic vision, and they got prepared concerning this coalition agreement, and there are interesting ideas for us, and some ideas are not good for us, but the discussion is ongoing. And our task is to convince, First of all, we should get concrete guarantees, and Mr. Andrei Kovalyev said about this, and this is also about compensation for some period. And second, we should compensate for the security risks. And here we should have strategic approach, and we should not say about a membership action plan when we are speaking about Nord Stream 2, because membership action plan is a positive story, and we should fight for it. But the provision of membership action plan does not increase our security in the short-term prospect. But our partners believe that this is even vice versa. This is a problem in the context of the movement of Ukraine to NATO. And so also third aspect, we have the ways we are working with our multiple partners. We want to stop this project. This may be done through US and all these sanctions. This is a real story. And there is low probability that this will influence the policy and final decision of the President of the United States. As of today, there are many legal aspects and political ones, and legal issues that prevent Congress to provide final decision, and this may delay or change it. And about the European Union, we have a lot of options, starting from when one of the EU countries may submit to the European Court, as it was in case of Opal pipeline. This is not the same legal situation, but there are many unexpected things. This may not stop the project, but this may suspend it for 3 or even more years. There are other creative options that I won't mention now, starting from the influence on certification of technical project and other options. We have them, and the use of such options depend on political agreement between US and key EU partners. And can we influence this process? Yes, we can, but our influence is not direct. Maybe you've heard what the Russian president said during his live interview. He tried to say that countries under external rule, one key signal was that he will speak with the others about us, and this is his logic. And he spoke about the price of meeting with Vladimir Zelensky, and he also provided some other signals. And you know that this was an orchestrated signal he wanted to provide now. And it's clear that the last discussions with the European Union, there was an article in Die Zeit, and Putin was ready to recognize some mistakes. He spoke about it carefully. To promote cooperation with the European Union, it is painful, but it is well perceived by some business in Germany and politicians in Germany. The last attempt to build such a partnership, and there was an idea to organize summit between EU and Russia, and there are some in-depth attempts, and this is only a tip of the iceberg. What we should do, we should work with politicians and with businessmen, and it is really important to have the meeting where conditions are discussed. Biden, by his decision, he became a player, and nothing will happen without him. And about the final conditions and how they are going to look, this depends on Biden's decision. And it depends also on those who will provide advice to him. And you know that in US, there are different opinions on this concerning sanctions, whether they should be imposed. We should influence those, we should provide more influence, and we should participate in meetings, and nothing should be done without us. And Ms. Klimshush, she mentioned trilateral negotiations, and Russia tried to get out of these negotiations, but they were not allowed to do so. So we are not speaking with the EU and Germany and US as equal partners, and this is a matter of concern. And one more thing that is really important. In current situation, all those talks about mythical gas, Turk gas, any gas from any place, but in reality, this will be Russian gas. On paper, it may look different. This situation, it reminds Rosukrenergo case. The scheme will be more creative, maybe. And this is a fundamental threat, as Andrei said. This may make us dependent, and this will deteriorate our situation, and we will be more dependent and corrupt. And they tried to reform a gas transportation system, but many Western partners and experts, they believe that gas transportation system is the element of corruption in Ukrainian history, and many things were changed recently, and there was negative reaction on changes of corporate governance. This is connected not with personalities, but with the logic. And our partners, they have concerns that there will be corruption rant. And the last thing I would like to mention, and this is, we understand that this is what we inherited from Soviet past, and we get proceeds to the budget from gas transit, and legally it belongs to Gazprom, to a aggressor state company, and we cannot continue to be in the situation. And we understand that we and our partners understand this, and I hope that in the nearest future we will start discussions about compensations and guarantees if we won't be able to stop this project, but we have chances for this. And I would like to say that we should have different plans, plan A, plan B, plan C, and other plans. And we should do everything possible in order that this project not be implemented. But when we are speaking about conditions and guarantees, we should clearly understand that without the strategy, we cannot go to our partners because we won't stand a chance, because this means that we will be able only to complain. And we do not want to lose. Summing up, we have chances to overcome the situation successfully. All these decisions are not simple, of course, and they are politically difficult. They are not popular. 100% they are not simple as any foreign policy issues, and they demand 100% of strategic view and proper approach to what we need. And in order to provide proper results, we need public discussions in order to properly work with Putin, Merkel, Macron, or other players who are involved in this. We should be a player as well.
Дякую. Ну,
Thank you. Well, it's good that we have today different public discussions, or maybe based on those public discussions, let's say, we would be able to offer a number of some strategic elements which are part of the strategy, which our country can take as for their instruments. Valery, you as the ambassador, former ambassador to the United States of Ukraine to the United States, you actually had to deal with the U.S. Congress and the presidential administration. Actually, you can talk a lot about the issues related to the construction of Nord Stream 2. Well, actually, it was coming back to Pavlo Klimkin. I can agree with him that Ukraine catastrophically loses subjectness in the international relations. What's your vision? How do you think? Do we have still a chance, if you're talking about this specific negotiation or this dialogue associated with the completion or non-completion, commissioning or non-commissioning of compensation mechanism regarding the Nord Stream 2, can we actually get back our subjectivity during our negotiations agency, let's say, and how you can evaluate today's chance regarding the policy on the part of the U.S. Congress, which could affect really the change of the decision taken or steps taken by the Mr. Biden's administration. Good afternoon. Thank you. I would like to start. I would like, first of all, to congratulate our national football team with their victory yesterday. Well, I'm talking about that because if it did not, all of us, we were thinking about compensation, maybe this wouldn't happen. But actually, they were ready to die on this soccer pitch, in order to get the victory. If our thought about all those things which you're talking about, maybe we wouldn't have our army the way we have it today. Why I'm talking about that? I'm a follower of the let's say, the steps which are based not on the real politic or the pragmatic issues. And from this point of view, I cannot see that anything can change for Ukraine from point of view of the assessment of this very important for the Russian Federation project, which is actually multi-versatile, multi-purpose one. I heard everybody, all the speakers, I would like to summing up our discussion, I would like to add something which I believe have not been voiced here. First of all, I'm positive that Ukraine has to continue to take the position that the key threat to the completion of this project, it's more political than economic one. And so the most important are the security threats to Ukraine. This was demonstrated by the military experts of Ukraine, and I agree with this position. We have to insist upon this aspect, and in doing so, we're speaking about some economic, financial compensators. I don't believe they are, really expedient today. Maybe for some experts, they have to work on this scenario, what to do with the Ukrainian gas transportation system, but not about the policy, because the key aspect here is the security and not the economy. We have always been telling that to our partners, and they support our position. In Washington, I represented Ukraine on behalf of the center, who they demanded some official position to be voiced. Actually, in those days, that was a very assured one. And my question to the head of the Nord Stream 2 addressed to those people who supported that project back in 2018. Well, given all other heads of the gas transportation companies or gas companies, European, international, you name those. So I put the questions which that person could not but answer that that was not the project with political component. To me, there was absolutely the one conclusion that this is associated with long-term objectives of Putin, and they're much more serious just to give the money to his closest, let's say, followers and friends. Mr. Chorin was talking about. There is the Sibir company. There is the Turkish Turkey stream, based on which they made a lot of money, But we are not talking about that. The intention of Putin is not only to influence the weak Europe, as he says, but he wants to establish his own rules and regulation. The worst scenario here that everything is being done according to the let's say to the measuring let's say the different tools of in the intention of Russian Federation. We are talking about this region only, but in Europe it's the same. There are different interests, and so-called pragmatism can lead to the situation when the consolidated position can actually mean the victory of the Russian Federation. And Ukraine is not the only country which suffers as a result of the success of such Russian line. I may say that the voices are now our Polish neighbors, and the articles which was published in the Zeitung, and I support that those conclusions regarding the NATO response or position regarding this pipeline, the position of the Baltic states. And I do appreciate their opinion. And the same Denmark, which for a long time has been trying to establish the European approach to this issue. NGOs which actually impact this decision in Europe. So all those actions in many countries, it's not we are not talking about just about the Ukrainian interests here. No, we are talking about everybody's interests, and not just citizens of the Ukraine, of those countries who are taking care of their security, generally speaking, and energy security in particular. So, well, I do not want to call those things compensators, but in order for this deficiency or deficit of this security in the eastern flank and our border with Russia to eliminate that, well, I'm talking about this, my personal opinion. And decisions might be very swift and fast taken. Whatever happens to the gas transportation system or the Nord Stream 2, this is something which is going to belongs to the future. But we have to think about our immediate threats. And so giving the Ukraine the lethal weapons of the defensive nature, supporting the naval, let's say, armaments. And we are going to raise this issue during our visit to President Zelensky to Washington. The specific things what we are going to do in the next few years, and of course, another scenario, what we are going to do in the distant future, in the years to come, because I really believe that there cannot be any status quo, and we have to realize that the Russian natural gas is not going to stay here forever. We will have to think about green energy, about our, let's say, versatile source of energy, like that the U.S. priorities, let's say policies based on quite new priorities, democracy, green economy. We have to use that, And actually, our stance must be very consistent. Honestly speaking, I would like to see more coordinated in the actions with those countries which also see and realize those threats like we do. In the United States, the two-party support is not guaranteed, like something, which just exists, This requires constant work and constant attention on the part of the Congress to do this issue. I do not completely agree. We can argue about that from a legal point of view. Nobody actually waived any sanctions in the White House. If you just read the documents, they just did not let's say, implemented those actions which were recommended by the Congress. So, from this point of view, we're talking about the change, cardinal, radical change of the position of the United States. I wouldn't say that. So far, their position is against the completion of the construction and commissioning of this energy project because they too consider this issue or this project as, in the United States Congress as the energy weapon of the Russian Federation. So friendship is friendship with some countries, but without any accusation, without any supported on based questions, which we hear very often from Ukrainian side. What we have today, the key meetings of Joe Biden with Mr. Putin, with Ms. Merkel, all those negotiations are going to take place until President Zelensky will have a chance to talk about those issues during their first meeting with President Biden. Number one, this is the first meeting of theirs. And honestly speaking, I don't want to have the situation where we just have to face the situation, and no choice. Just, everything has been resolved. You have some economic compensators. I hear all the time when the talks about economic compensators. Then the question is, so what is our clear and basic line of our behavior today? I believe it has to be unchangeable. And we are against those projects to be implemented in Europe. We are against using natural gas as the weapon. They use natural gas as for the external political purposes. If this line wins, we are going to have the consequences which will more detrimental, which will be more detrimental to European security when we are talking about the Russian and Putin coming back from the isolation. It's like an avalanche, like the snowball which increases rolling down, And this line will not lead to success for us. And number two, we are talking about the information attacks, information weapon. After the implementation of such a project, we will see what happens next to you in Europe and how they're going to use this fact for the information attacks. Summing up, I would like to say that our line of the last few months started to fluctuate with the opinion of main players when Ms. Merkel mentioned that the gas pipeline has been already completed. We have to think about something different. Why our position should change? No, I would like to say that it's not a fact that in the United States do not rely upon the German taking another decision or correcting the decision they announced. So we'll see what happens. But those discussions which I'm outlined here take place in Washington. So we have to come up with some kind of the single position. And this position shouldn't start with the words compensators. But if somebody would like to use this word compensator, but we are talking about compensators to further strengthening of the defense capability of this country. This is what we need in the near term or short-term perspective. We are talking about long-term perspective. We have to think about the green energy, let's say the different renewable source of energy, and we have to help today Europe not to lose that level of influence in the world, on the world, where the influence or the impact of China grows year in, year out, and we have to take care of the energy security. Those tasks for ourselves I visualized today. Thank you, Valery. Actually, we have come back to those security related risks, which actually we started our discussion with. And I do appreciate that you actually outlined the position of Ukraine, which should it be. I'll give you the chance to journalists to put their questions, and then everybody will have a chance to respond as the wrap up our discussion or summing up our discussion. We still have our colleagues still. I have three questions. Number one is addressed to Andrei Kobolev. The February report of the State Department to the U.S. Congress. Anna Zerkal mentioned that they did not, let's say, advise, took advice, or let's say they did not discuss that with Ukraine. And somebody said in Congress that this is kind of the treason or something like that, and actually they gave a chance to Putin to finish the construction of this gas pipeline. So what happened? Why Ukraine was not involved? Well, at least did not invited to take part in that. So maybe I'll ask the question. Do you think that all the steps taken by Europe and the United States, Biden-Putin summit meetings in Nord Stream 2, everything is shows the new reset, which we actually slept all of that away, and what you can say about the Putin's words when he mentioned during his meeting with Germany about Andrei, first of all, maybe you have a chance to answer the question of Christina and respond to the discussion maybe which we had today during the last. Well, sorry, actually, I had a bad connection, so I didn't hear the question. Christina, could you please repeat the question? The February report of the State Department address of the U.S. Congress, Anna Zerkal said that they did not take opinion of Ukraine, and they called it in Congress a kind of a treason or a betrayal. Why Ukraine was not involved in this discussion? What happened? After that, we saw the declaration, the statement of Blinken that the gas pipeline has been already built, and they can do anything. Well, I don't know the nuances or details, diplomatic details regarding those talks. But as I mentioned before, this is no news to us. The White House always, we are talking about the relations regarding the European regarding the Nord Stream 2. They really had a very difficult choice between the interests of the biggest economy, largest economy, Europe, Germany. They want really badly this gas pipeline to be completed, construction of that. So what happened? What happened that they over the ocean, they actually start to gravitate to the German position and they forget about the Ukrainian interest. I don't know. It's very difficult for me to comment on this, but I would like to repeat very important thing. This is not a sign or the grounds, and I agree with Mr. Chal, for us to let's say to surrender. Let's say against, or let's stop already fight against the construction of Nord Stream 2. We have to continue our work along those lines. Thank you. Would you also like to comment whether you think those new steps to establish different dialogues with Putin, different levels, whether those are the images or the signs, I would say, of new reset or something like that? Well, I know for sure that there are such ideas, such thoughts. I know that it would be very convenient if you take into consideration the history of the relations of the American politicians to the Russian Federation. The reset, this is a very convenient political step. Why it's so convenient? Because it allows you to close your eyes or something. It's saying that you already have another page of our life. 4 years later, nothing changes, and the new life is no better than the previous one. So, and the Russian Federation becomes even more picky, and let's say in their behavior, etc., etc. So. It's futile effort to try to explain to the Russian Federation the futile attempts to present something in a rose light, If we call the Nord Stream 2 project a commercial project, it does not take away its economic consequences, But the fact that in the United States there are a lot of people who who would like to call this situation as the reset and close their eyes, and this has always been the case, and this will remain to be the case forever. Thank you. Mr. Brez, I would like to ask you, how do you evaluate those latest initiatives of the United States and discussion which took place in the European Union regarding the, let's say, holding the summit between Putin and the EU? It seems to me that they start to catch up with Mr. Biden with his direct contact with Putin. What would be your assessment? Can we talk about the factor reset or reloading of the attitudes of the civilized world with the Russian Federation? In contrary to the fact that the Russian Federation didn't take a single step in order to be awarded for some their behavior of theirs, let's put it this way.
I think, Ivana, it was a big mistake of the Biden administration simply to grant the meeting with Putin without Putin doing anything to compensate for it. And yes, as you suggested, we just saw the reaction of at least of Merkel and Macron, where they proposed during the last European Council meeting that now the European Union restart up its dialogue with Putin. The good news is they were rebuffed. I mean, the most powerful leaders in the European Union had their initiative defeated by their colleagues, and they prompted, that suggestion prompted great upset. Not only the idea itself made the other European leaders angry, but also the way that Macron and Merkel proposed the meeting, i.e. they just kind of surprised everybody among their fellow European leaders just basically a few hours before they sat down to debate the idea. So they lost that debate, and I think hopefully learned a lesson that their colleagues are not ready to re-engage with Putin. Biden, he's taken a lot of criticism for having that meeting, and what he did also surprised Ukraine, right? I mean, he had this meeting, didn't consult with the Ukrainian side. That's wrong. That's not how we treat our friends and allies. And unfortunately, having worked in the White House for 4 years under a Republican administration, then been an ambassador to, nominated by a Democratic administration, it's not one party or the other that does this. Washington sometimes gets arrogant and self-focused, and there's not enough time in people's minds to do what they should be doing, which is consulting with our closest friends and allies. So I think it was a mistake. I think finally what Biden was doing was he was repairing the damage he perceived for having called Vladimir Putin a killer. As you may remember, just a few weeks earlier, he said, when asked on a major U.S. television news program, do you believe Vladimir Putin is a killer? And he said, yes, I do. So I think in this case, Biden was looking for a way to kind of clear the air. I think that was also a diplomatic mistake to have said that as the U.S. president, even though it's true. But, you don't always say everything that's true. That's a cardinal rule of diplomacy, of course. You shouldn't speak falsely, but you shouldn't say everything that's true. Sometimes it's unwise. And so therefore, I'm not so worried that this is another round at the Russia reset. Having worked with then Senator Biden, I think I have a sense of how important NATO is to him. It's the centerpiece of U.S. foreign policy, and how important Ukraine is as well in itself and as a way to deter Russia. So the policy is going to be quite tough against Russia. And I think one more comment I'd like to say is don't forget about Turkey in the mid to long term. I mean, as you guys all know, Turkey has begun military technological cooperation with Ukraine, not only by selling those really innovative drones that played a decisive role in stopping Russian forces in northwest Syria and in Libya, and then also in accounting for Azerbaijan's decisive victory over Armenia in the recent 44-day war. But also Turkey is working with Ukraine on stealth naval vessels and also a jet aircraft engine that Ukraine is so great at manufacturing. And so I bring that up, because President Biden, I think, sees Ukraine as an area on which Turkey and the U.S. can start to rebuild their strategic partnership. And finally, I point to Turkey because despite Turkish Stream, Turkey has just had the largest natural gas discoveries ever in the Black Sea, 500 billion cubic meters plus. Of course, Turkey wants to use that natural gas primarily for itself to improve its natural gas, not only balance, but reduce its current account deficit. But it's something I think would be wise for Ukraine and Turkey and the United States and the European Union to look at as a possible supply source that could diversify Ukraine's away from dependence on Russia. Thanks.
Дякую. Ми будемо
I think we are going to sum up our discussion. I would like to get back to Vitaly Portnikov with a question, actually, what we've heard today here. Is there any opportunity for Ukraine, if any, to return the agency in this ever-growing wish for the dialogue with the Russian Federation, how to ensure its interests and the rights, and how to find the mutual interest with our partners in order to protect our interests. In your opinion, can we talk about some competitors and which exactly?
The main, what we can do, we should assess the level of threats properly here and in the West. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russian Federation, Lavrov, he said that Russia will continue its policy, and the question is where Russia wants to go. And Ukraine is a part of former empire, and Nord Stream 2 is the attempt of the empire to collect the territories. And I've heard a conceptual response about how Putin sees the future. When he was asked about Ukrainians, he said, and I will quote, "I do not believe that Ukrainians are unfriendly. This is one people, different. We have Mordva people. They speak languages that are more. They have different language, and there were big Russians and small Russians, and this was said by him that this is Russian people. The Russian people lives in the territory of Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine. They may speak different languages, but he believes that this is one nation, one people, and they want to return the lands. And we may adopt laws on language, but this doesn't convince Putin. They believe that you may speak different languages, Russian language, Belarus, Ukrainian, but they just want to have one country, and they believe that they should be one country. We do not know how they are going to do it, militarily or by economic means, and this is what our foreign partners cannot understand, no matter how many times you tell this. For example, President Obama believed that Putin will get Crimea and will be satisfied with it. And someone may believe that Putin would like to preserve Lukashenko regime, but Putin doesn't need Lukashenko regime. They just want to get their territories. And Putin will get satisfied when Russian flag will be in Kiev and in Minsk. And they want to have these territories as oblasts. For example, republics are for Mordva and for other peoples. So we should provide proper response, otherwise Putin will win. This is us or him. There's nothing to negotiate. You asked about Vladimir Zelensky. So we cannot provide security guarantees to separatists. This is like in Abkhazia, this is like in Serbia, that cannot provide guarantees of security for Kosovo. And for example, Russians, they cannot provide guarantees of security to Ukraine because they do not believe that we are a separate country, a separate nation. This is our political reality. Bulgaria blocks Euro integration attempts of Northern Macedonia because they want that they recognize that they are Bulgars, and we live in such conditions that our neighbor country, they do not believe that we are a separate nation, and everything that is done in Nord Stream 2 project, this is the part of the overall project. And Russia wants to restore its empire in the former borders, and they may do it through different means, including military means. And Putin would not hand over power to others. Putin is trying to support the balance. Maybe this sounds apolitical, but until 2014, no one believed that Russia may attack Ukraine. Now everyone sees that this is true. So they won't get rid of their plans, and Russia continues to work with the transit. They speak with Germans. They bribe politicians, and this plan is ongoing, and it is really threatening in its ways. Thank you. Valery would like to respond, and then Pavlo will provide his take. I always like to hear to Vitaly Portnikov. The only thing I would like to specify, I believe that Russia, yes, and Putin, they have such a wish. But after events in 2005, 2014 in Ukraine, and the war that is ongoing, and the opposition provided by Ukrainians, they are not very sure now about it. So they had some illusions, but they stopped when they got first killed from Donbass. And they understand that Ukrainian people, not politicians, that the people identify the way. And they try to ruin our opportunity to be transit country, and this is not about that they want to have Ukraine as the part, and we should look at these declarations, but I have a different view on declarations of Putin and other leaders. Agency is formed in relations with partners and enemies and opponents, but it is also formed inside the country. And the answer to all these plans, there is such an answer. There should be powerful Ukraine, strong and consolidated nation, and I believe that in historic prospect, and I agree with Vitaly, these plans of Putin, they won't be implemented in Russia. There is business, and there are people who have kids who study abroad, business that is developed due to new technology, and they have big problems there. This oligarchic group, it creates problems to growing number of people. I believe we should have a more optimistic view of the future. And historically, We are in a difficult period. This is the end of this ruining of empire project, and this ruining may be ongoing for tens of years, and this is our historic mission. And I believe that, and you've asked about it, that this response should be no new illusional guarantees and agreements in political, economic, and energy sector. I do not believe in this. I believe that defense agreement with U.S. I believe in it, and also we should speak with key European nations, and we are grateful to Great Britain for the concrete steps, and they really won over Russians, and this will be put in manual. So we should work with those who are ready to work with us. Maybe some leaders, some countries, they should come to this, and we should choose those in Europe and choose those in the world who understand this key important moment and who understands what future will be concerning geopolitical issues. So this agency, it will it is being formed by Ukrainian people and power, and Ukrainian power should provide proper response to the challenges.
I think Pablo, you're talking about the reset of our relations with Russia is something real. And of course, the security agreement, and what can we expect or do not expect of the, let's say, acceptable, non-acceptable compensators, not compensators, etc. I can see any reset. I can see coming back, let's say, the return of historical cycle, let's say, in 10 years from now, with the talks about partnership of the EU with the Eurasian Union, not European Union, Eurasian Union, both in the EU and in Russia for different reasons. There is an intention and a wish to see whether such partnership can exist and be some kind of a counterbalance to United States and China, which they both fear and let's say believe to be the source of some kind of, let's say, vulnerability, or let's say ambiguity. Let's say, and who can you guarantee anything in the world where any principle does not work? And so we can actually sign all the time anything like that, but they can exist only after the final reset. And of course, we can talk about Putin, about Russia, about the European Union. We can, let's say, do that from the philosophical point of view, political point of view. Like Democrats said, there are always two questions: who is guilty and what to do. You know, we approximately understand today what Putin is after, what he wants to have. And we do understand only too well that under circumstances, the reset is impossible, again, within the previous these borders. And this is the challenge which is our statehood faces. So we have to talk what realistically can be done and how we can affect on our partially structures, governmental structures, or our public organizations, in order to not only to talk or do something unconcerted, let's say. So even if we take in all these jazz, we have to at least try to play in the same tune. And, you know, speaking about the Nord Stream, the only thing we have to do is just to start doing something. Thank you. Thank you. On my part, in my turn, first of all, I would like to thank all our speakers. Number two, I also would like to briefly sum up our discussion. And actually, in my opinion, those efforts or those attempts to feel for the grounds to establish the relationship with the Russian Federation, again, as for me, they take place through the dissolving of the identity and the position of Ukraine, because our position stopped to be very clear one, as Valery Chalin mentioned that. It stopped to be based, if you will, on some kind of the value dimension. We actually lost our advantage, which we had during the 2014-2015, but my opinion is based on our discussion with our colleagues from the European Union. Summing up our discussion regarding Nord Stream 2, in order for us to move ahead, and we all agree that we need a real strategy, including several components. Among those, the security component must be the main one. We need this strategy to include the economic and technological components, what to do specifically about the gas pipeline. If we lose the transit opportunity, how we are going to maintain this pipeline, etc., etc. But so far, we cannot see the step-by-step specific strategy, and I believe maybe within a few next years, given that we have some proposals in place, we can actually do something about that. Speaking about the compensators, which we can hear from different players, both in Ukraine and beyond its boundaries, I heard here, and I hope that I correctly understood our discussion, that we cannot agree to any economic direct compensators. Ukraine should not agree to those in any case, because this is actually, we are talking about our survival. It's something which deals with our existence and our development in the future. And what we can talk about, as Andrei mentioned, something which is tangible and measurable, and realistic. We are talking about the first starting steps, but we are talking about some tangible things, maybe military, maybe defense-related, etc. Number three, which I would like to emphasize, that definitely here we all agree that the completion of the construction and the commissioning of Nord Stream 2 will give an additional levers of pressure on the part of the Russian Federation, not only Ukraine, but Europe and other serious players in the world. By our arguments could be heard, and our arguments could be perceived much more efficiently, provided that we continue here the real implementation, real reform. If we do not only try to let's say to try to stomp our feet on the ground and try to demand from somebody to do something to get some tangible result. For that, we have to return our identity, let's say, which is being developed, and to coordinate our actions, which was repeatedly mentioned here, with those countries who understand the key, important, critically important situation relating to the geopolitical situation in the world, those who understand our position, who really is prepared to give us a hand and to help us to rebuff the actions of those who would like to change the situation in their favor. I would like to thank everybody here, to the UCMC, to the North Atlantic Course, and I hope this is going to be just the first in a number of our discussions, which will make it possible for us to develop on these specific issues, which actually is of interest not only to the Parliament, not only to the business.